we'll start now. Barakallahu feek.
Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين ورحمة الله للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. All the praise and all the glory is due to Allah, and I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his last prophet and messenger. May the blessings and peace of Allah be upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and those who followed his path up to the day of judgment. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this new session, session number 7 in Hadith terminology and classification. It is basically the 8th session because we have already stopped at one of those presentations and 2 classes. In today's session, we are discussing the classification of hadith into Sahih, Hasan, and Da'if, which is basically, I think, the most important classification of hadith, which must be studied deeply, and also simply because it has an impact on our all other studies. Basically, before we quote any hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we focus on, first of all, on its authenticity. So before quoting any hadith or before relying or basing any legal view or ruling on any text, we first and foremost ask ourselves this critical question: is it authentic or not? Is this hadith reliable or not? After making sure of its authenticity, we move to the next step of checking about its meaning, whether the meaning is compatible to the legal ruling that we discuss, and afterwards we have further questions on the source or on the dalil. So the first question that we ask on any dalil is whether this dalil is authentic or not, whether it is sahih or not. If it is weak, so in this case, it cannot be, according to the massive majority of the earlier scholars, it cannot be relied on as a source or as a dalil for any legal ruling. And if it is authentic, either it is sahih or hasan, so it may be actually relied on as a dalil. In this session, inshallah, we are discussing the Sahih Hadith, the basic requirements of a Sahih Hadith, the classification of Sahih Hadith into Sahihun lidhatihi and Sahihun lighayrihi. And then we will talk about the legal value of the Sahih Hadith. And also we will talk about the first scholars to compile the ahadith which are sound only, or the Sahih ahadith only, by disregarding any other weak or unreliable reports. And we are going to ask some more questions on this topic. First of all, this is what you see in front of you is the basic classification of hadith according to authenticity. As I mentioned to you before, that the ahadith are first classified into ahad and mutawatir. And the ahad is further classified into gharib, aziz, mashhur, fard, etc. Mustafid according to the Hanafi scholars. So the basic question is, what about the mutawatir? The mutawatir is outside this classification. Why? Can anybody answer this question? Why the mutawatir is not included in our classification of authentic, reliable, or unreliable? Can anybody answer this question? It doesn't need to be verified because it's narrated from multiple narrators, exactly. And number two, it doesn't rely on the criteria that we have put. The criteria of judging any report as mutawatir or calling this report as mutawatir, it basically relies on the number of narrators and also on the impossibility of meeting together to put a lie to the Prophet ﷺ. So the concept of tawatur is beyond this classification. So the ahad is further classified into accepted and rejected. Somebody is asking me, what do you mean by rejected? Can we have some ahadith which are rejected? Yes, we call them what you can call the weak ahadith, and also the fabricated ahadith. They are rejected. We cannot accept them because they are not part, they are not surely, the weak hadith is not surely a part of the statements of the Prophet ﷺ. It's not issued by the Messenger ﷺ for sure. And the fabricated cannot be actually called a hadith because it's just a lie. It is something which is issued by a liar or somebody accused of lying to the Prophet ﷺ or in his general talks. So it cannot be regarded as a hadith. We cannot give the term hadith for this category of reports, right? So now we focus on the accepted ahadith. The accepted ahadith are sahih and hasan, but it's not all the case. As we will explain later, my brothers and sisters, that even the sahih ahadith themselves may be effective or ineffective. What do you mean by effective and ineffective? I mean that some of those ahadith, my brothers and sisters, may be actually sound and authentic, reliable. They fulfill all the obligations, all the requirements of the Sahih Hadith. But when you call them for application, when you call them for being a dalil, I can tell you frankly, these hadiths cannot be relied on. You tell me how? These are statements of the Prophet ﷺ. I tell you, yes, some of those hadiths, my brothers and sisters, are abrogated. They are no longer applicable according to the law. You understand? Some of them, they are ambiguous. Some of them, they are in conflict with other equally authentic ahadith or even with ayat of the Quran. So before acting upon them, we need to clarify these ambiguities. We need to understand the type of conflict between those hadith and the ayat. And afterwards, we can actually prefer one hadith because it becomes a preponderant, or we can reconciliate, as we mentioned before in Umdat al-Ahkam. You remember when we talked about this methodology. So now we are focusing on, I think you can punch you can put your hands, pinch your finger on basically our position in the map of this classification. Now we are talking actually about the authentic ahadith. So the classification according to authenticity, either to reliable or unreliable or authentic and weak. So we will focus on the authentic ahadith. So this is a question. Can we regard all authentic reports as accepted or legally effective? An accepted ahad report is accredited after the authentication of its text and isnad. And some ahadith may be proved authentic by way of certain ascription to the Prophet ﷺ, but they may contradict more authentic ahadith, or they are abrogated by chronologically subsequent reports. Although these reports are held authentic, they cannot be used as a source of the law, since the ruling is either suspended or no longer effective. So this is basically the classification of accepted ahad reports. Maybe Hasan or Sahih. And the Sahih may be further classified into Sahihun لذاته or Sahihun لغيره. And the Hasan may be Hasanun لذاته or Hasanun لغيره. So what are the two types of the Sahih? The Sahih may be Sahih by itself. So it doesn't need any support of any other evidence to prove that it is authentic, which means that it is by all requirements are fulfilled in this Sahih Hadith. Okay, and sometimes it may not be authentic, it is Hasan only, which means that it has a deficiency in only one point of its transmission. Like, for example, the narrator is weak in his memory. He does not occupy the highest degrees of retentiveness. So it is Hasan, right? In this case, it is called Hasan. It's labeled as Hasan, fairly authentic. But when we compile other reports which support the meaning and the chain of transmission that we have for this Hasan, now we can upgrade it to become Sahih. But it's not Sahih by itself. It is Sahih by other extraneous or extra evidences which were provided. Such is the case for the Hasanun Lidhati and Hasanun Lighayri. So the Hasanun Lighayri is basically weak hadith, but by Shawahid and Mutaba'at, or the other substantiating and supporting proofs, we come to the conclusion that it is upgraded or it is raised to the level of Hasanun, but it's not Hasanun Lidhatihi for itself or by itself. It is Hasanun Lighayrihi. It's Hasan by extraneous evidence. What is the basic definition of the Sahih Hadith according to the unanimous agreement of all the scholars of Hadith? All the scholars of Hadith come to the conclusion that the Sahih Hadith is هو ما اتصل سنده بنقل العدل الضابط عن مثله وسلم عن شذوذ وعلة. This is the Arabic definition of the Sahih. It's called هو ما اتصل سنده. And in this definition, you will find the requirements of the Sahih Hadith. It is a tradition or a report. With this report means what? This report, the word mattasala, or the report or a tradition, this includes what? Can anybody explain for me? Includes, number one, a report, statements, actions, and tacit approvals of the Prophet ﷺ. Number two, it also marfu', mawquf, and marfu', mawquf, and maqtu', which means any report which is either attributed to the Prophet ﷺ or to anybody else. Now we are judging any report, any piece of news coming to us from the Prophet ﷺ or from the Sahaba. You understand what I'm saying? So we call it a tradition, or it's a report. In the general meaning of the word hadith, you mean that the word hadith has three meanings. It may be or two basic meanings. It may be called for just the statements or actions, just approvals of the Prophet ﷺ, or it may be actually include the statements of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een also. So we are using the word report here in its general meaning. Okay, so it is, yes. So it is basically a report which is attributed to any authority. This is, you remember when I talked to you about the overlapping in the classification of hadith. So the hadith may be classified according to its authority to be an elevated hadith, marfu' to the Prophet ﷺ, or it may be actually mawquf or maqtu'. But at the same time, all those types may be further classified to become sahih or hasan or da'if. Understand what I'm saying? So a tradition with a continuous chain of upright and perfectly accurate reporters up to the point of its termination. So the second point in the authentic hadith, or the first point, is that it is of a continuous chain of narrators. So there is no disseverance, there is no discontinuity in any part of this isnad whatsoever, either at the link between the Sahabi and the Tabi'i, between the Tabi'i and the Tabi'i, and between the Tabi'i and the succeeding generation, between the compiler of the book and his teacher, between the teacher and the great teacher, all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so the first point in the authentic hadith is that it has a continuous chain of narrators. There is no disseverance. If there is any disseverance at any point, we have a deficiency in this isnad, and this deficiency qualifies this hadith to become weak, and it disqualifies it to become authentic or sahih. Of upright and perfectly accurate narrators. So, okay, now we have two basic conditions of the narrators or reporters involved in the chain of this report. Number one, they must be, all of them must be upright in the sense that in terms of their religion, in terms of their manners and behavior, what do we mean by reliable? We mean by reliable that those people have actually or they enjoy the highest degrees in terms of their integrity. So those people do not, for example, those people they do not commit lies. Those people they do not make any, they do not actually lie to the Prophet ﷺ, or they lie to anybody else. People, they even do not make the major sins, but they are people of integrity in the general and detailed meaning of the word. They don't, their integrity is not impaired by any act or anything that may affect their adala, uprightness, or integrity. So this is a very important condition which must be in fact fulfilled by all the narrators. We are not actually talking about just one narrator or two narrators. We talk about all the people, all people involved in the chain of transmission. And they are not only upright, but those people must actually be must also be accurate in the sense that they have high degrees in retentiveness, And we are talking about this condition in detail right now. And finally, this hadith is neither anomalous nor defective. Anomalous in the sense that it's not labeled as shadh. What is the meaning of shadh? Can anybody explain for me what is the meaning of shadh? It goes against other narrators, but on one condition, Abu Abdullah, which is the shadh here is a hadith which is reported by an authentic reporter. It's reported by an authentic and reliable reporter in contradiction to the versions of his other colleagues who are more reliable than him. So we need to understand that it is the shaz is hadith which is, it is authentic since it has been reported through a continuous chain of reporters. All of them are connected to each other. All of them are actually having the highest degrees of integrity, and they are perfect with regard to their accuracy. But at the same time, he goes in conflict with the text which is transmitted by his other colleagues who are more reliable than him. We need to emphasize this. It has a conflict, and this reporter has more reliable reporters who are more qualified and better qualified than him. And not defective. And by defect, we will talk about some internal subtleties in the hadith which disqualify it to be authentic. Like, for example, there is a mistake, there is interpolation, there is insertion, there is sometimes a mistake in the chain of transmission, there are some hidden problems which are only known by deeply rooted scholars who usually report it. So this authentic hadith should be devoid of this deficiency. This is the basic definition of the sound hadith. We need to memorize it. What is the sound hadith? Hadith, a tradition with a continuous chain of upright and perfectly accurate reporters up to the point of its termination, and which can be neither anomalous nor defective. ما اتصل سنده بنقل العدل الضابط عن مثله وسلم عن شذوذ وعلة. What are the basic conditions or requirements for the Sahih Hadith? I mentioned. Can anybody just tell me what are the basic bottom line? You can unto its termination. Yes, exactly. It must be all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. From the Prophet ﷺ all the way to the reporter. The first condition, as mentioned by Brother Muhammad, is number one, connected chain, the continuity of the chain of reporters. What is the second condition? The second condition is that, number one, narrators must be upright and accurate. They must have the quality of being accurate and upright. What is the third condition? What is the third condition? The third condition is it is not anomalous. And number 4, neither shaz nor having a hidden defect. Okay, it's not mu'allal, which means that doesn't have a hidden defect. There is a difference between mu'all and mu'allal. You know the meaning, the difference between mu'all and mu'allal in Arabic? Anybody doesn't know? Mu'all, they usually call it for the word which has the end of the word has حرف علة, and the حروف العلة is alif and waw and ya. Okay, so it's called mu'all. But mu'allal it is basically in the terminology of hadith reporters, it's called for a hadith which has illah. And illah literally means deficiency or a problem. Okay? So these are the basic requirements of the Sahih Hadith: continuous chain, adala and dabt of the narrators. Adala is integrity and dabt is accuracy. Number three, absence of anomaly and absence of hidden defects. The first is the continuity of the chain of authorities. The chain of authorities must be continuous, must be completely preserved all the way back to the final authority. This is further explained in the common term which is usually used by the scholars of hadith, as the hadith should be muttasil, continuously uninterrupted hadith. It must be continuously uninterrupted hadith. There is no deficiency in any point of its transmission. Why? Because if it has a deficiency in any chain of transmission, we don't have assurance and we don't have enough information to know who is that missing link. This missing link may be a weak narrator. Sometimes it may be actually a fabricator or a liar. You understand? So when we have a missing link in between or in the middle of the chain of transmission, we in fact don't know how many links are missing. And number two, this missing link, we don't know what about its characteristics. We don't know about its we don't know about its what you mean. We don't know about its whether it is, for sure we will have majhul al-hal. It will be majhul al-hal. Majhul al-hal means that it is not identified in the personality of this one is not identified. So we don't know his name. And consequently, if we don't have enough information about his or her name, we don't have information about her qualifications or his qualifications, whether he is upright or not, whether he is retentive or not, he has retentive memory or not. So this is a deficiency which causes many problems in the hadith. The first problem, that we don't know how many links are involved. Number two, we don't have enough information, basic information about the identity of that person who was involved in transmitting this hadith. Number three, we don't know the qualifications of that missing link. And number four, maybe this hadith has been fabricated and then proposed to us, and it cannot be referred to the Prophet ﷺ at any way. So this is one of the critical problems in the chain of authorities. That's why the scholars of hadith paid attention to this very important requirement. And some people nowadays, when they look at when they try to criticize the methodologies of the early scholars of hadith, they say, look, we're concerned about the chain of narrators instead of occupying themselves more with the texts or the mutun of the ahadith, by elaborating some critical points about this mutun of ahadith. I can answer them back by saying those scholars, they are dealing with a source of information which is primarily based on reports. And the first point, before criticizing any text, you must first of all make sure that this text has been attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. And afterwards, you can discuss it. You can understand its meaning. You understand what I'm saying? This is a reason that the first question that the scholars of hadith paid attention to was about the continuity of the isnad, about the reporters involved in the chain of transmission, about their retentiveness, about accuracy, about their integrity. They were very concerned about those many questions that were actually raised in the realm of hadith transmission. The second question, my brothers and sisters, is the uprightness and retentiveness of all reporters. As I mentioned, all reporters must be adl, upright, and ضابط, accurate. What is adala or uprightness? Uprightness means that the transmitters are neither doubtful nor dishonored, which means that the scholars gave us a criterion about it, that they do not perpetrate major sins, and they do not insist on minor sins. So they do not have a problem with regard to their integrity. Why integrity? Because they are actually dealing with a holy, what you can call a sacred text. They are talking about something on which information will be based, and those informations are important because the Prophet ﷺ has an authority. And this authority of the Prophet ﷺ must be actually assured that this person who carried this responsibility of conveying these piece of information are actually, they are people who have wara, those people who have mannerism. They have the highest degrees of what you can call the highest degrees of integrity, of uprightness, of adala. You understand what I'm saying? And number two is retentiveness, which means vigilant. It's not only sufficient that those people are or they are upright, but they must be retentive also, vigilant in the sense of remembering. And dabt is of two types. There is dabtu sadrin and dabtu satrin. Dabtu sadr is retentiveness with regard, sadr is the chest, is the heart, which means that when this reporter reports something from his memory, we must make sure that he has a retentive memory and he has the ability of retrieving what he memorizes accurately without any change in the original text that he has. He must have accuracy in differentiating between similar words. When he is reporting something, we must make sure that this person has a very sharp memory, which qualify him to carry the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And dabtu satrin, the satr means line or script. So if he is reporting his hadith from a book, we must make sure that this person is accurate in writing and in copying. He is accurate in reading whatever he has, and he is also honest in the sense that he did not insert any other materials to his written ahadith in his documents, in his notebooks. And he must be also vigilant in the sense that he is aware whether any of his students were actually playing with his materials and they tried to insert any materials which are not in his own, any sentences, any words, any diacritic marks, any dots, anything, they had rudimentary materials of transmitting the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So they didn't have those retrieval systems that we have right now. Those people, they have to write everything, things themselves. They have to put it in very expensive materials. They have to read it a couple of times. They have to compare it to other materials. They have to read it to the teacher. The teacher must read it to them. So it is a complicated issue. These are the types of dabt, as I mentioned to you: retentive memory and retention through documentation, which is dabtu al-kitab. The third condition of the authentic hadith or the sahih hadith is the absence of anomaly, and that the text of the report must not be anomalous, meaning that it does not contradict a reliable hadith reported by a larger number of transmitters or even by one transmitter of a higher authority and ranking. This will be actually further explained when we discuss the issue of shadh or anomalous hadith. But what I want you to know that there is a difference between shadh and munkar. There is, in the terminology of hadith, we have a difference between the shadh and the munkar. What is the shadh and what is the munkar? Who can differentiate between the shadh and the munkar? Uh, should they say before I received a question here, which is, should they say frankly that they have weak memories? No, they do not say themselves, but this is conducted through intensive research by the reporters and by the scholars specialized in that field. So they had methodology, which means that they compare the reports of all students of one teacher to see, and based on that, they can grade the memory of that student. You understand what I'm saying? So, according to the number of discrepancies he has. Hidayah is saying Munkar is a da'if contradicting Sahih. Munkar is weak narrators contradicting reliable reporters. This is the main point in the munkar. But in Shaz hadith, as we mentioned, in Shaz hadith, it is a report of agreeable or reliable reporter. It's the report of a reliable reporter in contradiction to whom? To more reliable and more trustworthy reporters. I forgot to tell you something very important regarding the previous condition, which is about integrity. My brothers and sisters, if a problem arises regarding the uprightness of a certain narrator, this is a fatal problem. This is a dead problem. Why? It's killing. Because they cannot accept the reports of a liar. According to the majority of scholars, even if he might have repented committing lies, I'm not talking about a liar who is accused of lying to the Prophet ﷺ. In this case, it's a unanimous agreement that all of his hadiths are not accepted, even if he repented this act. Why? Because we cannot surely ascertain whether he committed the lie before or after this repentance. So all of his reports are fabricated. It's not regarded as hadith, they are fabricated. So if a person has a deficiency in his adala, we cannot actually accept his hadith, and it is a dead problem. But for retentiveness, there are grades, and according to the retentiveness, the scholars have actually graded the narrators of hadith. Some of them are actually high and they are a big authority. Others have some occasional mistakes. Others have regular mistakes. Okay. The fourth condition of the Sahih Hadith is the absence of obvious and subtle defects. The report must not have any obvious or subtle defects. As I mentioned before, a defect may exist either in the isnad or it may exist in the matn, the text of the hadith. For example, the isnad, the reporter might have actually elevated the hadith, which is a statement of a sahabi. It's only a sahabi. So he raises it back to the Prophet ﷺ, elevates it back to the Prophet ﷺ, and says that this is a reporter from the Messenger ﷺ. Or the hadith has a disconnected isnad, but he refers it back by ittisal al-mursal. Like, for example, he inserts a person in the middle, though this person is not known to have reported this hadith through any other parallel chain of transmissions. A defect may also include a subtle change of a word, an addition of a sentence, insertion of certain words known as idraj, and in some cases an insertion of one hadith into another hadith. So it makes a confusion between two different hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ. He amalgamates them together and makes them one hadith. This is an example of the Sahih hadith. عن عبد الله بن يوسف قال أخبرنا مالك عن ابن شهاب الزهري عن محمد بن جبير بن مطعم عن أبيه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قرأ في المغرب بالطور. Abdullah ibn Yusuf from Malik ibn Anas, from Ibn Shihab, from Muhammad ibn Jubayr ibn Mut'im, from Jubayr ibn Mut'im, who said, I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam reciting Surah At-Tur during the sunset prayer. This is an ideal example of the authentic hadith attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How? This hadith, number one, has a continuous chain of transmissions. Why? Because each narrator has been proved to be a student of the transmitter above him. So there is a relationship. This relationship is proved, and their communication together is proved. This has been reported to us through our assets, our big books and dictionaries of the reporters and narrators. So those, each person, he is a figure, he is a historical figure which has been known during his time. The people know his teachers and they know his students, so they wrote about his biographies. Those of his contemporaneous scholars recognized him, talked about him, criticized him, etc. So he has, from the literary sources that we have, that this person is a figure. He is a figure. He is a personality, as he is recognized as a narrator of hadith at his time, and it has been proved to receive the hadith from his respective teacher. Number two, all reporters are upright and accurate. How? Let us go back to the biographical dictionaries. Abdullah ibn Yusuf is graded as trustworthy and accurate. ثقة متقن. The scholars classified him as ثقة متقن. So when we refer to the books of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, تقريب التقريب, تهذيب الأسماء, تقريب التهذيب, all of those biographical dictionaries, we made sure that Abdullah ibn Yusuf is regarded as ثقة متقن, or trustworthy and accurate narrator. Malik is graded as Imam, master of hadith, and Hafiz, he is accurate. Scholars qualified Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri as faqih and hafiz. They labeled him as faqih, jurist, and hafiz, accurate. And they also said متفق على جلالته وإتقانه. His perfection and greatness in knowledge is a matter of consensus among scholars. Muhammad ibn Jubayr is thiqa, trustworthy. And also his father is Mut'im, Jubayr ibn Mut'im. He is one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, who occupy the highest grades in terms of uprightness and trustworthiness. The third point is that the text of this hadith is not contradicted by any other authentic reporters. Number four, the hadith is devoid of any subtle obvious. When we conducted an empirical study of an inductive study of all the texts of hadith, we made sure that this hadith doesn't have any defect. All the scholars of hadith which intensively criticize the hadith of Bukhari and Muslim and all the hadith, like for example the Kitab al-Tarikh al-Kabir, al-Tarikh al-Awsat, al-Tarikh al-Saghir, the al-Ilal ibn Abi Hatim, al-Ilal al-Daraqutni, al-Ilal, all those books of Ilal did not record a defect for this hadith in particular. So the conclusion, which is based on all those premises, is that this hadith is what? This hadith is weak, this hadith is Hasan, or this hadith is authentic. It's Sahih. Exactly. We call it, it is Sahih. Right. The classification, but this Sahih hadith, according to the conditions we mentioned, is further classified, as I mentioned to you, into two basic categories. Sahihun لذاته and Sahihun لغيره. Umar as-Sayyid is saying, how can a hadith be transmitted if one of its links are missing? Wouldn't that mean that it can have been transmitted? No, it can be transmitted, Brother Umar. But the reporter, in one point of transmitting this hadith, forgets. Like, for example, you report a hadith from Bukhari. So you could actually remember 3 reporters, but you forgot one of them. Okay, and you cannot say it. Why? Because if you say it, and it has been proved that it is incorrect, because for sure there are many parallel transmissions, because this hadith was circulated in the circles of hadith, you will be accused of committing what? Of committing what? Of lying. And if you are proved to be a liar, all of your legacy, all of your reports will fall apart, and nobody will benefit from them. Some of those narrators, they are not sure, so they use a neutral term. Like, for example, they say an, but the hadith in this case is mu'an, and this is another deficiency. An does not identify how this person received this hadith from his respective teacher. Another reason for having missing links, maybe at the beginnings of the Islamic history, in the beginnings of Islamic spread, and in the beginnings of the spread of the science of hadith, some of the reporters were not concerned of accurately tracing each statement according to isnad. You understand what I'm saying? Because in that age, or at that time, the scholars did not consistently use the system of isnad 100%. They used it, unanimously they used it, and they proliferated hadiths according to isnads, and a hadith without isnad is null and void. It's not acceptable, was not acceptable. But some of them, they may have this lack of, and that's why it is, there is a special treatment of the hadith reported by the greatest tabi'een, like Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, for example. Why? Because most of their ahadith, many of their ahadith did not have the name of the Sahabi. You understand what I'm saying? So it is called mursal, and we cannot rely on it. So the scholars made some extra evidences or some extra conditions to verify the authenticity of this type of ahadith, especially. Why? Because they were aware that the scholars at that time, or those scholars in particular, were not accustomed to provide the isnads regularly and consistently. You understand now? Okay. So back to the classification of a hadith or the sahih hadith. It is sahihun lidhatihi and sahihun lighayrihi. Sahihun lidhatihi is called, the sahih is called sahihun lidhatihi when it has all the basic four requirements of a sahih hadith. So we call it sahih, or we call it sahihun lidhatihi. There is no problem. What about sahihun lighayrihi, or authentic by an extraneous evidence or external evidence? This is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, or a statement of a Sahabi or Tabi, etc., which fulfills all the requirements of the Sahih hadith, in that it has an unbroken chain of transmitters. All of them are reliable and retentive, and it is clear of hidden defects and outlandish content. It only contains a point of weakness on its retentiveness. What it is? This is that the narrator is weak, is not extremely weak, but the narrator commits some occasional mistakes. So he has a da'af. He has weakness in what? In integrity or in memory? Huh? Who knows? In memory or integrity? In integrity, because he is making some mistakes in memory. Okay, so it is, mashallah. All of you are vigilant and aware. Okay, alhamdulillah. So it is, he has a deficiency in the memory. And number two, this hadith has been supported by multiple paths of transmission on that point of weakness. So the scholars of hadith, their methodology, my brothers and sisters, is that they look at the weak point of the hadith. So they diagnose the disease and they try to put healing remedy for this disease. How? They look at the point of weakness in that narrator. So they search for any other colleagues of this reporter to provide multiple paths of transmission. If they find that, and it is in support of the hadith under discussion, we call this shawahid and mutaba'at. And we will discuss shawahid and mutaba'at and differentiate between them. So they are parallel texts which supported the text under discussion and supported the isnads under discussion. And by doing this, and they had also set up conditions for the ahadith which qualify to be shahid and mutaba'. It's only any ahadith. They have their methodology in doing this. Based on that, they qualify the hadith to be better raised or elevated to become sahihun, but it's not. They have to say that lighayrihi, because it has been raised by some other external evidences. This hadith in front of you is a fitting example for this type of ahadith. حدثنا أبو قريب حدثنا عبدة بن سليمان عن محمد بن عمرو عن أبي سلمة عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك عند كل صلاة. Abu Quraib from Abda ibn Sulaiman, from Muhammad ibn Amr, from Abu Salama, from Abu Huraira, who reported the Prophet ﷺ saying, had it not been for the fear of imposing hardship on my ummah, I would have ordered them to brush their teeth before every obligatory prayer. Somebody may ask me a question, Ikhwani, this hadith is reported in Sahih al-Bukhari and in Muslim. How can you regard it as it is externally sound? No. I'm talking about this very particular chain of transmission. And number two, this hadith has been raised to be authentic. So there is no problem of including it in Sahih al-Bukhari or Sahih Muslim. Let us actually diagnose this hadith and analyze it. Muhammad ibn Amr ibn Alqama, my brothers and sisters, is well known for his trustworthiness and piety. But the scholars had concerns regarding his retentiveness. So this hadith, this person in particular, he has a problem with regard to his memory. So this hadith should be graded as what? As what? As Hasan. Why it is Hasan? Because it has a problem in the memory, and this problem is not that great. So this person is not actually qualified 5 out of 10. No, he is actually 8 or 7. We have a grading system anyhow that we will discuss later. But anyhow, this hadith, same report, was received from Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, from Abu Salama, from Zayd ibn Khalid, from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have a parallel chain of transmission which overcome the deficiency of Muhammad ibn Alqama. And due to this additional evidence, the report of Muhammad ibn Amr ibn Alqama ibn Waqas Laythi is raised from the status of Hasan to the status of Sahihun lighayrihi, which is sound by virtue of an extraneous evidence. So look at this diagram that you see in front of the hadiths have been reported by Abu Huraira and Zayd ibn Khalid. And both reports have been reported by Abu Salama ibn Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. He is the son of Abdul Rahman ibn Auf radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he is one of the tabi'in. Abu Salama delivered this hadith to whom? To Muhammad ibn Amr, and Muhammad delivered it to Abdullah ibn Sulaiman, and Abdullah ibn Sulaiman version has been reported by Al-Imam al-Tirmidhi. But there is another version which proves that parallel to Muhammad ibn Amr, we have Muhammad ibn Ibrahim. Okay, so Muhammad ibn Ibrahim is proved to give support to the version of Muhammad ibn Amr, and this is the reason that the hadith has been raised from being Hasanun lidatihi, Hasanun lidati, to become what? To become what? Sahihun lighayrihi. To become what, my brothers and sisters? Sahihun lighayrihi. Okay. Another question which is very important in this context. This question is, there may be some questions being raised. So let me try to answer them. If you can type your questions on the group of WhatsApp, it would be actually better for me so that I can follow up, inshallah. So the question here is, what is the legal value of the Sahih Hadith? We need to concentrate on this point, because all Muslim scholars, jurists, whether they adopt reasoning Ahlul Ra'i and Ahlul Hadith, they refer to the Sunnah and adhere to it when they are sure about its authenticity. They also maintain that referring to the authentic Hadith and abiding by it is part and parcel of Islam. No matter what school they belong to or what region they come from, and no matter whether their schools have continued to exist till today or cease to exist. All of them agree on the point that the authentic hadith is authoritative. Yes, they have some problems with regard to the authenticity. They may differ about the authenticity. Like, for example, when Imam Abu Hanifa radiyallahu ta'ala anhu says or he believes in that, he cannot accept the ahad hadith if it is in some common issue which must have been widespread. Like, for example, if there is an issue which is widespread among the Sahaba, Abu Hanifa says how it was reported through an ahad. It must be reported through multiple paths, for example. So the concern of Abu Hanifa is a concern about the authenticity. You understand? But he does not reject. He does not have a categorical rejection of the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Hanifa relies on the hadith radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He is a prominent figure. He is a followed imam. And the belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah that we respect our imams. And we believe that their disagreements and their differences of opinion resulted basically on ijtihad, on exercising intensive personal reasoning, that they did their best and the utmost to provide for us solutions and legal rulings for those issues. So they don't have a problem with hadith. Like, for example, Imam Malik, you remember when somebody is asking him and he says, كُلٌّ يُؤْخَذُ مِنْ قَوْلِهِ وَيُرَدُّ. Everybody, we accept and we reject his opinion or his views, except the one in that tomb, in that grave, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the Prophet of Allah. May the blessings and peace of Allah be upon him. Imam al-Shafi'i, when he was sitting and telling the people the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and somebody asked him a question, and he says, and he gave him the view, and he said, I don't need you to, and Imam al-Shafi'i gave him a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ about it, and he says, no, I don't need your, I need your own view. I need your own view, point of view, your concept about it. What did Imam al-Shafi'i say? Do you see me, I'm in a church? You see me, I'm a priest? You see me, I'm a Muslim? What type of a sky that may cover me? What type of earth that may carry me? If I say something in contradiction to the statement of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of our imams, when anything comes to them from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they put that in their heads. They submit and obey and follow and love and surrender. This is the concept of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, my brothers and sisters. They refer to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They give it preference to the views of men and women. They provide it as the first priority. They give it the first priority. Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Ahmad, all of them, they had similar statements to emphasize the fact that the Sahih Hadith is a binding, has a binding authority. This is, my brothers and sisters, what I wanted to share with you, because I think the time of our session is already finished right now, and we will continue, inshallah, in finishing or in discussing this presentation, inshallah, next session. If you have any questions or any inquiries, please don't hesitate, inshallah, raising them. For sure, we have we will have a quiz, but this quiz, inshallah, will maybe delayed for next week until we finish this session completely, inshallah. I received a question here, and the hadith of a dog, this will be answered in Umdat al-Ahkam, but here, if the threshold of for fiqh is Hasan, why is Sahih is لغيره relevant? This is a technical classification, brother Abu Abdullah. This is a technical classification in the sense that, but with regard to if there is a conflict between the Hasan and Sahih, both of them are regarded as authentic. So we do not prefer the Sahih to the Hasan. You understand what I'm saying? We don't prefer the Sahih to the Hasan because all of them have been proved to be authentic. Anyhow, though we give this 10 out of 10 and this 9 out of 10, for example. So this is it because there is a clash? The Sahih لغيره will be taken over? No, it will not, because when we will discuss the issue of reconciliation between the apparently conflicting hadith, we will regard the Hasan and Sahih in one category. This giving priority will be actually restricted to Sahih and Hasan vis-a-vis the weak hadith. Understand what I'm saying? So it is not relevant in this issue. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Any further questions or any inquiries, my brothers and sisters? Barakallahu feekum. You can send your questions, inshallah, on the WhatsApp group. It is possible. Okay. So inshallah, we will have a short break and then come back, inshallah, very soon. Okay, it's only 10 minutes and we will be back, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.